I was just going to provide a little bit of background information for why it was important for us to integrate some time to talk about coaching in computer science education. And part of what we do at the Constellation Center is we work with teachers, we promote access and equity to computer science, and one of the ways that we've been able to do that is Sababu and Terry have helped create this comprehensive professional development um, to fully support teachers in the best way that we can, in the best ways that we can. We've talked a lot to Brian about our approach and how this uh, can work in many different school districts, many different regions across the state. And we just feel that coaching really does need to be part of any professional development plan. Later in the day, you're going to hear from Sababu. You're also going to hear from Terry, about their experiences in terms of their development as a coach and also their experiences in coaching teachers. Because PD to learn content, CS content is absolutely important, but the coaching aspect really brings a whole other level of learning, of sustainability, of elevating the teaching profession. And so for the next couple of sessions, we've brought on some really amazing presenters to talk about the importance of coaching in computer science, especially because there's a lot of new teachers, but also because the research in the teaching and learning in computer science education is fairly new if you think about it compared to some of the other disciplines. And so those are some of the reasons why we felt it was important to integrate coaching into this summit. So with that, we want to introduce Michelle Harris, who she's a senior consultant at the Instructional Coaching Group. She has authored some amazing books and resources, along with Jim Knight, who is also an expert, at coaching. And we're just very honored and pleased to have her here with us this morning. So I'm going to bring her on stage to welcome her to the summit. And, we're just super excited that you're here with us, Michelle. Thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank you for having me, Lean. I want to say thank you to Lean and her team, Sababu, Terry, Brian, everyone else that has put this together. I'm so excited to be here and to talk about coaching with everyone and just the power that it can have for equitable access. So I'm ready to get started.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So we'll hand it over to you, and I'll bring up your presentation in just a bit. Okay.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. We are going to learn together today about what it is to connect through coaching and how we can build bridges through coaching and that powerful job embedded professional learning for equitable access for all students and teachers alike. So I want to talk a little bit very briefly here about our mission statement as a company. I work for Instructional Coaching Group. I work for Jim Knight. I'm one of only 4 consultants that do this work around the world. And I am so grateful that I get to talk to people from all around the world about the work they're doing with teachers and students and just moving the needle for everyone to get better. We believe in excellent instruction every day in every class for every student. So I want to start with a little story about what that actually means. This is my kid. His name is Porter. He just graduated from high school 3 weeks ago. But there was a time that Porter was a little boy starting first grade. And we had recently moved, and we had moved into the district that I had been working in as first a teacher. And when Porter was a first grader, I was a coach. I had mostly been in middle schools, but I was at a K-8 school. Porter had been going to Montessori. There was a little Montessori at the bottom of a hill where we lived, and he had been one of the very few kids that was there full-time for kindergarten. In fact, he was the only full-time kid. Most kids in kindergarten came in the morning or came in the afternoon, and he had thrived in Montessori. And so when we moved into the district that I had been working in for 12 years. And our little elementary school where he was going to start first grade was just about a half a mile away. So I called and said, I would love to bring him over. He's used to a really small environment. I would love to have him meet his teacher, etc. So we walk over, we go into the classroom, and his teacher, young, vibrant, comes up to me and in front of Porter says to me, oh, Porter's been in Montessori. We have a lot of concerns about kids that are in Montessori. They just don't seem to know when to raise their hand. They kind of get up and move around a lot. And I was so taken aback that this was the first conversation that I had had with his teacher. He was coming in to first grade, and this was the conversation. So of course, I don't know that she knew I was an educator, and I didn't kind of want to throw that in her face, but I said, oh, well, let's talk about the kind of learner that Porter is. And that experience really kind of shook me, because as I was driving to my little school, K-8 school at the time, I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I am sending the very best 6-year-old I have to first grade this year. And my kid, just like everyone's kid, deserves excellent instruction every day in every class, regardless of the teacher, regardless of the school, regardless of the zip code of the state, and regardless for secondary of the course or the content. Every student deserves this. And every parent and every guardian sends their kid, the very best kid they have on that day, and they're doing the very best job they can parenting. And it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter what classroom they walk into, what school they walk into, where they live, and what the course is. And that's really where coaching comes in. We want to think about those silos of greatness that exist in every school. I could walk into any school in any country and say to the first adult, take me to where the great instruction's happening. And any adult could say, oop, come down here. Ooh, I want to show you this. But what we want to do is deprivatize all that greatness. We want to blow the lids off those silos of greatness and talk all together openly and honestly about what is working for kids, what is working for teachers, how are teachers working smarter, not harder, and how are kids learning. And the way we do that is through coaching. The way we do that is through conversations and connections and collaborations and being open and courageous and vulnerable to talk about what we don't know or how to do things that we don't know how to do. Atul Gawande is a Stanford-trained Harvard surgeon. And I love him because he understands coaching. Now, Atul talks in this TED Talk, where this quote is from, about the fact that he started to notice that his rates of death and his rates of complications were static. They weren't falling anymore. And he wanted to know why. And so he got a coach. And he said, I didn't want to get a coach. I'm a Stanford-trained Harvard surgeon. I'm the best of the best. I didn't want to get a coach. And when that coach came in and watched him perform a surgery, he thought to himself, well, when I sit down with this guy, he's not going to have anything to say to me, because that was perfect. Well, the coach had 2 double-sided pages of notes for him and told him things like this. You operated for 30 minutes off reflective surfaces. The light had swung out of the wound. Also, Atul, when your elbows go up, that means you are not in control of the operating field and you need to either put your utensil down, whatever it is you're using, or move your feet. And those kinds of things, those eyes and ears, helped him see some of the things that he couldn't see. We don't have cameras following us around all day long. And so what he talks about that is so critical, and what I'm going to talk about here this morning, is everybody needs a coach. Everybody, no matter how good, or if you're struggling, everyone needs a coach, because we don't know what it looks like when we're doing what we do. And here's the other thing. If it's done well, coaching may be the most effective intervention ever designed for human performance. We know lots of places where coaching happens. So let's talk about that. Why is it different in education? Why is deprivatization of the great stuff that's happening why can it be so complex? And I'm going to talk to you about why helping for and through change can be so tough. Because really what you're doing when you're coaching is you're helping someone for change, and you're helping someone through change. And here's the thing about helping for and through change. You are asking people to think differently, to change what they do and what they know. So maybe it's about changing the way they think about teaching computer science courses. Maybe it's asking them to change what they think about teaching in general. Maybe it's asking them to look at who are the kids that do well or don't do well in computer science or other courses. Do I need to change my thinking about that? Do I need to change my assumptions about that? Maybe we're asking people to change the way they think about kids in general or treat kids in general. Maybe we're asking them to change their own abilities or think about the change with their students' abilities. Maybe we're asking them to change how to gather, interpret their classroom data. Maybe it's a mindset shift. And, right? I could go on and on and on. But when you're asking people to change in this way, this is asking people to be vulnerable, because they have to look at how they show up every single day as a teacher, as an educator, and how they show up for kids. And that's hard work. Helping for change is both exhausting and exhilarating. And this quote came from a coach I was working in Franklin County, Georgia years ago. And this is what she said to me. And I said, that's it. That's the quote. I'm going to start using that on my slides, because it is so hard, but it is also so rewarding. And here's why. Teachers are living, breathing, complicated professionals who are working with living, breathing, complicated young human beings. And there is a lot of complications and complexities when it comes to humans. And the only way that we can support and help for and through change is to honor that complexity. So we're going to talk about what those complexities are, and there are 5 of them. The first one is just the complexity of change. We know that without change, we're not ever going to grow or succeed in big and little ways. So here's the thing about change. James Prohaska and his buddies here wrote a book way back when, 1994. And they wrote a book called Changing for Good. And at the time, they called it revolutionary. Well, we know that anytime you are changing for good, you have to go through stages. And they named these stages. The first stage is contemplation. You have to think about it. I really want to run a 5K. Okay, well, why is that? Well, I've been noticing that, my pants are a little tight, or I've been noticing I get out of breath when I shouldn't, those kinds of things. So then I have to prepare, right? I download Couch to 5K on my phone, and then I actually have to do it. And sometimes there's a large crevasse between that preparation and action. And then once I do it and maintain it for a while, then it's no longer change I can terminate. It's now just habitual. What is actually very cutting edge about this is what's written in red right there. Pre-contemplation. What Prohaska and his research team found was about 92% of us are pre-contemplative about a change that needs to happen in our lives. In other words, we don't even know that our pants are too tight. We don't even know we get out of breath doing things. So if we're pre-contemplative, we're not going to change. Oftentimes with coaching, it's not that the teachers we coach can't see the solution. In fact, it's the opposite of that. My experience coaching for years and years and years now is that most of the time, once the people I coach figure out what the problem is, they have 100 ways to solve it. The problem is not seeing the problem, because we don't know what it looks like when we do what we do all day long. Nobody's following us around with cameras. And the other thing about change is it's really emotional. Change is hard because it's emotional. Kelly and Connor did a research study and wrote a paper about it, about these 5 phases of change that are emotional. And they say when you start out in a change cycle, I'm going to run a 5K. You're an uninformed optimist because you don't know how hard it's going to be. And then you go out and actually run a mile, and you immediately become an informed pessimist because it's like, oh, I got to run 3.2 of these. This was really hard. And then when you're really in the thick of it, when you're just slogging away, that run after you had happy hour and maybe 3 glasses of wine instead of 2. Oh gosh, this is really hard. And that's when we're in the valley of despair. Now that feels a little melodramatic, but when you're in it, it's the valley of despair. Here's the thing about the valley of despair. It's where most people give up. What you need in the valley of despair is a coach. You need a coach to say to you, nope, you can do this. And let's think of some ways that you can do this. Let's analyze some strategies. Because once you move up and out of that into that informed optimism and the success and fulfillment, that's when you are like, oh, I did that thing. So in that valley of despair, which some people, this is called a lot of different things, the implementation dip, the learning dip, I kind of call it where I give up. But when you invest the time and energy, and when you have someone next to you or in your head coaching you, you can power through it. And then the next time you're in it, you're like, oh, I remember this. I remember what this feels like. I know what this feels like, and I know the strategies I can use to move out of it. I think the valley of despair was the school year 21-22. I have heard from people all over the world how difficult this year was. And I also know that people made it. And when we look back on this year and think about the ways we made it, the next time we're in a change cycle where we're feeling like we're in the valley of despair, we are more likely to move up and out of that, thinking about what were the strategies I employed there. Shane Lopez wrote a book called Making Hope Happen. And in this book, he talks a lot about what hope is. And so I always think about when I'm in the valley of despair, or when I'm coaching someone and they're in the valley of despair, I need to do what Shane Lopez calls conducting a hope audit. In other words, where is hope breaking down? And in his book, he describes hope as being 3 things: having a goal, having multiple pathways to hit the goal, so if one doesn't work, another one might, and then having what he calls agency, or a belief that you can get there. So when I conduct a hope audit with the teachers I coach, I go back to the goal we set, because without a goal, it's not coaching. It's just a series of nice conversations. I look at the pathways we've chosen and decide, okay, which one of these isn't working? Maybe there's another one. And I, again, talk to somebody, hey, we can do this. Let's talk about how. Coaching is basically employing a constant hope audit. We're constantly hope auditing people. Hey, I see you're in the valley of despair. Let's go back to the goal. Let's look at our pathways. Let's reinvigorate our belief that we can do this. And let's tweak some things if we need to. It's never static. It's always like, let's figure out. I think of coaching very often as a science experiment. We're going to try some things and see what works. The second big complexity of helping for and through change is something we call identity. Most of our research comes from the Harvard Negotiation Project, Doug Stone, Sheila Heen, and their colleagues that have been doing this work for decades now. They say that identity is the story we tell ourselves about who we are. And in that story, we often err on the side of hero, not villain. And so if someone comes in to disrupt that story, someone comes in and says, or doesn't say, but implies, you're not doing it right, that bumps up against our identity. The thing about being an educator is it's not just a job. It's who we are in so many ways. You don't believe me? Go out to dinner tonight. And then if somebody's letting their kid run wild, try not to be a teacher in that situation. The story we tell ourselves about who we are is, I'm a good teacher, therefore I'm a good person. Doug Stone, Sheila Heen, and their colleagues have written lots and lots of books. Difficult Conversations is one that they write, and also, Thanks for the Feedback. So in all of their research, they talk a lot about this concept of identity. So I want to talk a little bit about identity when it comes to coaching. And I want to draw a parallel between instructional coaching and coaching in the athletic world. And because I know football, because I've got 3 football players that I live with, I'm going to talk about football. So when you think about coaching in football, we know this guy right here, and everybody knows who that is. He uses a coach. Even though probably not anybody in my family, but probably people will say one day that he was the greatest of all time when it came to football. He still uses a coach. It may be about little tiny things, maybe his footwork. Who knows? But he still uses a coach. Now, this guy, Marcus Mariota, who hails from University of Oregon, where I'm from, is been in the NFL for a while now, and he is now going to be playing in Atlanta. I guarantee that this guy is still using a coach pretty extensively. And you have an up-and-comer, Desmond Ridder, who also will be using a coach, even though he's brand new to the NFL. There is no shame in that game. They are all 3 of these guys, when they are good enough to get into the NFL, which we know what those percentages are, they're all using a coach. They all just use a coach differently. And so when we look at instructional coaching and coaching within a school setting, we have to think about coaching the same way we think about coaching in sports, as an asset model. We can all improve. Even Tom Brady can get better. Even Marcus Mariota can get better. Desmond Ridder can get better. They just use coaches differently. And so coaching can never be seen as a deficit model. And one of the reasons why is because it bumps up against people's identities. If I know that the person next to me is using a coach because they are about to be non-renewed, I'm not going to ask you to use the coach because I don't want anybody to think I'm in trouble. I will put in the comment, it's the Hope book is Shane Lopez. Sorry, Making Hope. Shane Lopez is the author, and the book is called Making Hope Happen. Sorry. Okay, there we go. The next complexity is a pretty simple one, and that is that we are thinking workers. Educators are thinking workers. So here's the thing about being a thinking worker. If you think for a living, Thomas Davenport says Other people can't do the thinking for you. You're solving big and little thorny challenges all day long as an educator, but you don't have someone telling you all day how to solve those big and little thorny challenges. You're doing it on your own. One of the things about thinking for a living is you need a ton of autonomy. You need to constantly be a reflective practitioner, and then you need to put that reflection into action. Sometimes you go to other people to ask them, how would you do this? But most of the time you think back, oh, this has happened to me before. I know what happened last time. I'm going to do the same thing, or I'm going to tweak it. As a thinking worker, these three things are absolutely necessary. So coaching cannot be, hey, let me just come tell you what to do and expect you to do it. Coaching has to be full of autonomy on the teacher's part, reflection, and then action. The other thing about coaching, big one, is status. Here's the thing about status. Edgar Schein wrote a book called Helping, and in that book, he talks about the fact that any helping situation between two adults is intrinsically unbalanced. You have a helper, you have a helpee. And when you have a helper and a helpee, the helpee is constantly asking themselves, either consciously or subconsciously, am I getting the status that I deserve? And then the helper has to be very, very conscious about the fact that they have to equilibrate the conversation. That means I'm listening as a coach more than I'm talking. That means I'm referring to what the teacher that I'm coaching already knows how to do, and that I am making it an experience where the teacher feels constantly heard. The last big piece about this whole idea of helping for and through change and why it's complex is just the fact that human motivation is so complex. We have to understand human motivation. Now, I've read a lot about motivation, but here's the thing. I always come back to Dan Pink and his seminal work Drive. In that work, he talks about this, that we have to set goals for ourselves. Goals that other people set for us can have really dangerous side effects, and they are not healthy. And so when I am in a coaching cycle, I want to constantly be thinking about, am I giving the teacher the autonomy to set a goal that really is going to matter to them and their classroom? What really matters to most teachers? Kids. So are we talking about kids? Or is this one more way to tell teachers you're not doing it right? It can't be. It has to be about kids. So I need to make sure that coaching is about autonomy, and not all the autonomy in the world, but we tend to go top down instead of dialogical, about a goal that they can master and about a goal that matters. So coaching has to be linked to kids, because I don't know very many teachers that are like, I don't really care how kids do. We all care about kids. The other thing about motivation, and David Rock did this SCARF model, and his question was, what drives our natural response to minimize all those threats that are around us and maximize those rewards? What are we motivated by? We're motivated by status, which is like a sense of personal worth. We're motivated by pathways to the future. That's why good coaching is goal-oriented. We're motivated by autonomy. There's that word again. We're motivated by a sense of safety. This is a place that I can express what's happening and not be judged. And we're motivated by fairness. Zaretta Hammond, and I'm going to refer to her over and over and over again, talks about motivation this way. I am far more motivated if I'm confident, right? A lot of people are talking about teacher efficacy. Really, all that is confidence. However, I cannot be confident if I am not competent. I might be able to be, but we all know people that are not competent and confident, and what that sounds like and looks like. And so with kids and with adults, competence precedes confidence. That means that I have to get really good at implementing this thing or understanding this thing before I want to keep doing it, before I'm motivated to keep doing it. That's where coaching comes in. The coach helps the teacher be more competent, gradually releases responsibility, and then the teacher's confident. So I'm going to ask you just to, for a minute, to just reflect on how those complexities of helping resonate for you. And is there truth in your experience to helping for and through change being both exhausting and exhilarating? So those are the 5 complexities. Feel free to weigh in the chat. The chat is active and being monitored. And I'm just going to give you about 1 minute to just weigh in the chat or think on your own before we move on. All right. So then the question becomes how? Okay. Now that I know about these complexities, now that I understand that sometimes coaching can be really complex and I want what's best for kids and I want to be better, but how? How do I do that? So I'm going to talk about kind of 2 different categories of how. The first category is what we like to call a coaching way of being. You guys, I could just listen to all of you just in the chat, like just read what you have to say in the chat all day long. I love it. So let's talk a little bit about a coaching way of being. We have 7 what we call partnership principles that are very much our kind of how we walk on solid ground. These may resonate for you. They may parallel how you walk on solid ground or how you want to walk on solid ground. But really, the idea of a way of being is when I move through my, my role, when I move through my world, how do people see me? And what is my impact on those around me? One of the things we talk about is just treating everyone the way they deserve to be treated. Equality. That means that everyone matters the same. That means that in an asset-based coaching model, it doesn't matter if you're a brand new teacher or a veteran teacher. It doesn't matter if you came from the private sector and have a certification that is you don't have deep pedagogical knowledge. None of those things matter. I'm still going to treat you the way you deserve to be treated. And that is really important in coaching because coaching can sometimes feel like a top-down situation. And we don't want to have it that way. Also, constantly looking for the wiggle room, constantly looking for choice, giving people that sweet spot of choice. And that's usually 2 or 3 things, because no choice is extremely paralyzing. If I can't say no, then saying yes has no meaning. And too much choice is paralyzing. Like going to Cheesecake Factory, you just order the same thing every single time you go. Also, making sure, and this is critical, that when we coach, the educators we coach have a voice. That means we listen more than we talk. We seek first to understand. And someone in the chat, I think it was um, Brian possibly asked about, how this parallels the work we do with students. Russ Qualia has written a lot about choice, and he says that when teachers have more choice and voice, when they're listened to, when they feel heard, they're way more likely to give choice and voice to students. And when students feel like they have choice and voice, they're 17 times more likely to be engaged. And we know what happens when students aren't engaged. And so whether it's a computer science course, or whether it's just I feel safe at school, having kids have choice and voice is critical. So we need to first give it to teachers, so teachers feel okay giving that to kids. The next piece is dialogue, and that is just to have a conversation that is not about being right, but about doing right. Also, making sure there's time to reflect, and then turn that reflection into action. Oftentimes, we reflect, but we never do anything about it. And the thing about coaching, it's turning from this culture of just talking to a culture of action. And then the last thing is knowing that everyone learns in a coaching relationship. Everyone learns. I learn, the teacher learns, the students learn. We're all learning from each other. So I want you to think now about your way of being. How do people know just by spending time with you what your solid ground is? And how do you know what your solid ground is? What is your way of being? And I'm going to just give you a minute to look at the slides and weigh in the chat. All right. So the first how is really about your way of being, how you walk on solid ground, the absolute vibe you give off. Do you believe in equality? Do you believe in reciprocity? Do you believe in giving others choice and voice? Because people are going to know whether you say it or not. And nobody walks around going, I believe in choice. Look at me giving you choice. It's more about that people see that, and it's going to be mirrored back to you. The way you move through the world is going to be mirrored back to you. And so how else do we make sure that coaching is based on an asset model, and that we move people into, through, and out of change in a way that is filled with dignity, filled with belonging, filled with joy? How do we do that? Well, one of the main things that we talk about in our work, and that we absolutely ground ourselves in, is taking it back to students and their growth over and over and over again. Coaching cannot be seen as a fix it. It cannot be seen as I'm only working with people that are struggling. It cannot be seen as a deficit model. And if we talk about kids and ground our work in kids first, then everyone will feel like they need a coach. Even in the face of complexity, which I don't know a more complex work environment than a school. I don't know a more complex environment than a classroom. You can do all the things, and still somebody's going to get their head stuck in a chair. And nobody ever told you when you went to school to be a teacher that if you planned a lesson, planned for assessment, planned for all the ways you can scaffold and modify and accommodate and engage, that when a kid gets his head stuck in a chair, all that goes out the window. And so how do we constantly think about kids first in all of the work that we're doing? And how do we make sure that all the work we're doing has a direct line to teachers learning, students learning, and building systems of sustainability? Making sure that when I walk away as a coach, that teacher's so motivated, they're still doing the thing that we talked about doing. And beyond that, again, deprivatizing all the great work that's happening in classrooms and making it so everyone can do it. That's what coaching is. Susan Rosenholtz, in a book called Teacher's Workplace in the 80s, and this was before all of the work that happened around PLCs with the do-fors, she researched what she called moving schools and stuck schools. And what she found was, in moving schools, they had a cycle like this, where goals were set, there was collaboration around those goals. That collaboration led to higher levels of teacher competence, which of course led to higher levels of student achievement, which of course led to higher levels of teacher motivation. And then we did it again, and we did it multiple times. And the schools where this was happening, where it was a part of the culture, those schools were achieving, those students were achieving, those teachers were highly engaged. They were being coached by each other, by coaches, and that's the way that they learned and grew. Again, let's take it back to Zaretta Hammond. I am going to be more confident if I am collaborating with someone else, I'm learning and growing, I'm implementing in a safe environment where I can come back and talk about whether it worked or whether it didn't work, and tweaking it and changing it with my colleagues and with a coach. I am going to have a higher level of confidence if it includes all the things that add up to competence, which we know are collaboration, conversation, and relationship. The only thing, according to Eggershine, that leaders do is create and manage culture. If part of our culture is that we can all get better, if part of our culture is that we can all coach each other, and that coaching is absolutely critical for all of us to get better, then that culture is not going to manage us. We're going to manage it. And if part of that culture is a high level of communication, collaboration, coaching, courage, because it takes courage to change and to be vulnerable, then we are going to get better. So, how do we do that? We become these bridges between what we know is happening in those silos of greatness and everything else. And we build these bridges through communication. We build these bridges through collaboration. We build them through coaching. And a bridge can be huge. It can span a mile-wide river, or it can be a tiny little bridge that's a little piece of plywood over a little creek. And so, just like coaching in athletics looks different for every single athlete, coaching in schools looks different for every single teacher. Maybe it is a year-long situation across the Mississippi River at the Delta in New Orleans. Or maybe it's a tiny little where the Mississippi starts up in Minnesota, a creek. Maybe it's that bridge. But as a coach, you have to be so flexible to know which bridge it is you're building with this teacher and how you're going to cross it together. When we connect and collaborate, we are basically deprivatizing high levels of effective teaching. We're empathetically listening. We're remembering what it's like to be a full-time classroom teacher. We're remembering what it was like to implement some things that were scary and new. We're remembering what it's like what it feels like as a teacher to be listened to be heard. And that is so important. We are also acknowledging and naming the why behind resistance. Why do people resist being coached? For so many reasons, and every single one of them is valid. They're scared of change. They're worried that change means they're not good enough. Identity, right? They're worried that this is change just for change's sake. They're tired. Someone else is doing the thinking for them. Here, implement this strategy. Don't worry, it has a 1.2 effect size. It'll work for all your kids. It's classroom first, strategy second, not the other way around. They are worried about status. They're worried about, if I use a coach, does that mean I'm struggling? And sometimes the motivation is not there because we're not recognizing that motivation comes from within. We don't reach goals that other people set for us. We have to have autonomy. There has to be a goal that's masterable. It has to be purposeful to me. My husband came home and set grocery bags down on the counter and said, honey, I got a deck for you. I'm not going to be motivated to do that. And so all of these things are the why. Another thing that has to happen is we have to become better at being witnesses to the good in schools. Here's the thing about what research around this. Keegan and Leahy wrote a book in 2001 called The Way We Talk Can Change the Way We Work, I believe. And in that book, they studied organizations and work teams. And what they found out was every single one of them, and these are their words, astonishingly under-communicates the genuine, positive, appreciative, and admiring experiences of its members. When we aren't being witnesses to the good, that's a terrible deprivation of the vitality of a work setting. And we know that the outside world is not being witnesses to the good. You don't read articles about educators doing good, great stuff. You read articles about the one teacher that brings the vodka bottle and puts it in her filing cabinet, which in a lot of ways, who can blame her? You read all the things about education that are not positive. And we know it's not going to come from the outside. It has to come from the inside. So what can we do? We can praise and give ongoing regard to replicate behavior, and to recognize effort towards change. Billions of dollars are spent every year on programs like PBIS and such. You know what those programs really hang their hats on? We praise to replicate behavior. And so when I'm in a classroom, the number one thing I'm doing before I ever have a conversation about what needs to change, I'm noticing very specific things that are happening that I want to bring up with that teacher. Hey, I saw you use proximity and I saw it really work. Hey, I saw that kid asking you what to do, and I saw you asking him some deeper probing questions so he can figure it out on his own. Wow, where'd you learn how to do that? Or, oh my gosh, I timed your wait time. Only a second year teacher, your wait time was 47 seconds. That's amazing. And so those small little celebrations can make a really huge difference. The other thing about being a witness to the good, that means I have to tame my advice monster. Because oftentimes advice is really judgment. And in his book, and I'll talk a little bit about him, but Michael Gagnère talks a lot about advice being unsolicited, and it's never as good as we think it's going to be. And so we listen without judgment, and we assume best intent. Being listened to, according to Meg Wheatley, who's written so much about just conversation, it's a healing act. It creates relationship. Our very natural state is to connect. Everyone has a story and everybody wants to tell it. We connect. I was on the plane in May of 2021, right after kind of everything started to open up. And I like a quiet plane. And I couldn't believe how noisy it was. And I was like, is there something going on? Here's me with my AirPods and my Bose on. And I'm like, what's going on? And I took off my headphones and I just realized, oh my gosh, this is maybe the first time that people have been on a plane forever and they're just connecting with each other. They're talking. It was kind of a cool thing to witness. We need to connect. To listen, to truly see someone without judgment or labels or aspirations of fixing their problems is one of the greatest ways we can care about people. And so we listen and we learn and we understand and we connect and we assume best intent. Because Brene Brown says, if we walk through the world, and actually her husband said this, I don't know that everybody's doing the best they can do. But if I assume they are, it makes my life better. So we walk through the world being a witness to the good. We walk through our schools assuming best intent, and we partnership coach. We sit on the same level as the teacher. We use dialogue, a back and forth conversation. We still use classroom data, but we have put students at the heart of all of it. Let's talk about where you want your kids to be. In order to learn, according to Amy Edmondson, who's done so much research on this, we have to be psychologically safe. Part of being psychologically safe means that I can share with you where I'm struggling, that I can share with you what I've tried that hasn't worked. I can be in that learning dip, that valley of despair, and we can talk about it. That's how we learn. I still have high expectations. I still know that I have to be here for kids, but no one's judging me. No one is telling me you do it this way. They're saying, let's do this together. Let's figure out. I need to stay curious longer. Let's figure out how to make it work. Let's figure out what you've tried that hasn't been working, or what you've tried that you want to come back to, or what you tried that has worked, and let's do more of that. And remember also that change happens from the inside out. We change because we're motivated from the inside, not from the outside. And so much research out there points to this over and over and over again. I want to do better for my kids. Therefore, I want to be coached is very different than, okay, come in and tell me what to do and I'll just do it. And the other thing about change is it takes a lot of time. I'm going to leave you with one last quote, and then Lean, I'm going to ask you to cue up the video. As we try to improve, we are drawn to those large, dramatic, and splashy programs from change. But really, we are more impacted by those small and simple changes in our daily routines. We don't change the world through epiphanies, but by doing lots of little things that add up to sustained transformation. We know, because we live it all day, every day, that simple things are not always easy to change. But if we improve one thing at a time, we are really making progress towards great things. So I'm going to leave you with this video that illustrates beautifully exactly what it means to make small and simple changes that add up to big things.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you for that. I just wanted to confirm the video.
Oh, I
Do
sent
you
you
have
a
a
link
okay?
via email, but you may not. You
Okay,
didn't get
just
it.
give me a second. I will cue that
Okay,
up.
I'm sorry.
Hi, Michelle. I am so sorry, but I did not receive that. I apologize for
I'm
that.
sorry.
Do you,
Hey, that's okay. I
if
will
you,
just end this quote because it's a lovely quote, and just thanking everyone for for their time today, and thank you for letting me talk for an hour.
well, no, that was wonderful. What we can do is make the video available, for participants. If you have that link, we can share that out. And also I can, you know, uh, figure out a way to either put it in the expo or just make it available for the participants to watch at a later time, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely, yeah. Let me find the link and
Sure.
see if I can put it in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, we greatly appreciate that.